Cronin. Very big welcome to Roll with the Punches to you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along. Looking forward to today's session.
So am I, very much so. Whereabouts are you in the world tuning in from today?
Well, specifically today, I'm normally in Sydney, but I've been doing some care work with my parents. So I'm on the farm that I actually grew up on 50 years ago. It's a beautiful old country homestead about an hour and a bit out of Sydney,
Oh,
southwestern
that's
Sydney.
nice. And
Yeah,
I
it's
bet
beautiful.
probably a much better place to be right now rather than in the
Yeah,
heart of Sydney.
absolutely.
Beautiful. Excellent. Well, I'm really, really excited to speak to you. And just as you logged on, I said it was quite timely for me. I am knee deep in wanting to be a little bit more meditative myself. Is that a word?
I think it is, yeah.
It is now. I've
It is
invented it.
now.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us first, who is Tom Cronin and how did you start in this space? Because you are quite the guru.
Well, I mean, I love meditation. I love teaching meditation. So I guess I would call myself a meditation teacher. And flowing from that, I'm a coach. So I coach a lot of people how to take the shortcut to getting to where I was. I spent hundreds of $1,000s with coaches and programs and trying to learn a lot of the mistakes the hard way to become established in this space that I'm in now. So I give people a bit of a shortcut to that. So I coach coaches on how to get there, teachers, meditation teachers, yoga teachers, how to scale their businesses. And I really love working with those people as well to help them get their message out to the world. And then running retreats. I do retreats when we're not in lockdown. We're supposed to have one in 2 months' time, which I don't think is going to go ahead now. And that's in Byron Bay. But yeah, normally we have retreats in Bali. We've got Greece, Dubai, and here in Australia. So that's a beautiful experience that I love to go through. And yeah, I wrote some books and have the film out, The Portal. So been busy boy.
Yeah, you certainly have. Amazing. Tell me, on this whole journey of meditation, I was just watching one of your YouTube videos, which is fantastic, by the way. When you logged on, I was like, oh no, I want to keep watching this. And I was like, no, he's the real thing. You get to speak to him. He'll talk back now. But what interests me is that there are different styles of meditation, and I'm one of those type A, very overthinky, probably like most people, really. But I like when I'm implementing something new, I really like to know that I'm doing it right and well, and what's the outcome, and is this the best one. And often in the middle of practicing some of these things, so this week I've been doing a lot of box breathing meditations just so that I'll have something to focus on. And even within that, there's a lot of what is this doing? So I don't know, I guess, can you introduce me a little bit in a snapshot about those 4 different types of meditations?
Yeah, meditation there's so many different types to practice. And the thing is, they can be useful to help us relax and be calmer, sleep better, make more money, have better relationships, be a better lover. They can also help us experience who we are without the personality, who we are without the story, who we are without our expectations, who we are without our guilt and our shame and our anxiety. Who are we when there's no me? And that's the thing that's missing in our world, is to connect to that deeper part of us, that spirit, that soul, that source, that isn't the thing that's always trying to get better at meditation. It's the thing that meditation helps us lose. And so I teach a particular style of meditation that's called Transcending Meditation. I've got some gratitude meditations and some yoga nidra meditations and some breath meditations, even that box meditation you're talking about. They're good tools to calm the ego, but there's still the ego you got to deal with, right? So the big question is, who are you if you're not the ego? And that's what we need to also start to explore, as well as those other tools. Yes, we do need to keep my body in health. So I have to have a healthy body. I have to eat the right foods and have the right supplements and the right, hydration, and look after my physical body. I need to look after my mind, check that my feeling body, that's my emotional body's in good space. So all those meditations are going to help for that. But then we can't and we don't want to ignore the part of us that's not those three, and that's the unbounded self. That's our spirit, that's our soul. And so getting a meditation that can help you transcend those things is really important, because then we're really starting to experience the fullness of what life is.
Yeah, right. You have my full attention now. How do I get there? How do
How
I
do I
get
get
that?
there?
Yeah, how do I get that?
Yeah. So certain techniques of meditation are better at getting you there than others. Some won't simply get you there. That's just the reality. They're not meant to get you there.
Yeah.
They're meant to get you focusing on something in the outer world, like manifesting more money or manifesting a lover. So that's out there. That's that world, the world of what we call relativity, where there's a subject and an object, subject being you, object being the attention of your, that your attention's landing on, that you want to manifest in your life so that your life can be better. And a lot of meditations focus around making the outer world better so that the inner world feels better, which is okay. We can play in that space. But what we want to do is we want to be free of the need for the outer world to be better so that we can feel better and just feel better regardless. And that comes from this transcendent experience. And in Sanskrit, it's got a word called turiya. Turiya means the fourth. And the fourth is the fourth state. So that's thinking, dream state, and deep sleep unconscious state. They're the first three states that people will experience on a daily basis. They go into thinking state, which is where they're identified by their I and their ego. Then they go into deep sleep, which is an unconscious state where they're not aware that they're in sleep. And the I doesn't exist anymore. Then they come into dream state, where the I exists and all their dreams revolve around their I, but they don't have control of the dream. And then they go back into thinking state. So these are three states that people move in and out of on a daily basis. Now, the fourth state, turiya, they realized through certain practices that you could access this other realm where you're awake and you're conscious, but you're not thinking. And the big question is, well, who is it or what is it that's awake and not thinking? And that's what needs to be explored in our world. And that's what really is missing, predominantly more than anything, is that we currently have majority of the world's population still ignorant of this inner state that exists. And when we start to experience that inner state that's unmoved and unaffected by the outer world, then we start to realize some sovereignty in our own existence. What that means is sovereignty means that the world can be inconsistent, it can be constantly changing, and it may not meet my expectations on a regular basis. However, my state is more stable and not affected by those inconsistencies. And that comes from the realization of what we call turiya, the fourth state.
Oh, I love this. I feel like that really lands with me in terms of where I feel I'm at, especially this last 12 months. In a definitely non-meditative state, but a very, I guess, my self-awareness and my focus is very much on controlling the controllables and controlling myself internally, and accepting and being okay with what I cannot control. So I feel like when you explain that, I'm like, I feel like that's what I have there, but I want I want the mind stillness. I want the meditation side of it. I want that thing that all of you guys talk about and that you teach, and that sitting down and being really still and mindful, I want to grasp more of.
Beautiful.
Is it odd that I would resonate that in the more conscious world, but not be able to access the meditation side of things as easily?
No, it's actually a natural progression. That there's a part of you that's inkling. It's got an inkling. It's got a subtle awareness about something else that is you. There's some. So the analogy I use for my students when I'm teaching them is that we use the analogy of the ocean. So on the surface of the ocean, there's peaks and troughs, and there's a reason why there's peaks and troughs, is because there's two things: there's water and something affecting the water. Okay, the waves don't just happen. They're affected by something: wind, high low pressure systems, currents, boats moving along it. So we have water, which on its own would just be still. But when something affects it, then it moves and it changes. It changes because things are impressing upon it. And that's what's happening with relativity, is that life is impressing upon us, leaving an impression. and it's a good impression or a bad impression. Someone says, oh my God, I love you so much. Then you have a good impression. So you have a bit of a peak. And someone says, you're an asshole, I don't want to live with you anymore. And then you have a trough. And so we're in this peak and trough experience where Bitcoin goes up, oh my God, life's really good. Bitcoin goes down, oh my God, this is terrible. Okay? So we're in what we call outcome-oriented fulfillment. There's fulfillment that's derived from outcomes. Now, the outcomes, unfortunately, are unstable and inconsistent. However, the ocean isn't just the thin layer of the surface that's being affected. If we transcend that layer and we go deep, deep down to the very depths, what we find is a deep stillness there. And that stillness exists because it's not being affected by something else. It's just here, one thing, water. And it's not influenced or affected. And so what you're yearning for is a deeper part of you that already exists. Now, you were trying to control it and experience it by not being affected by life. What happens is when we start to tap in and connect with that deeper part of us by diving deeper in the meditation experience, we stabilize that. And then when it becomes stabilized, rather than controlling it, it's just a natural response, which is really not a response because you're just observing. So the stabilization comes through the regular meditation practice, and that's by withdrawing from the sensory world, withdrawing from the mental stimulation, withdrawing from our engagement with the world that's causing the ripple effects, and diving into, on a regular basis, this is morning and evening, prioritizing the importance of not having stimulation, not having a peak and trough experience, and not searching for fulfillment in the outside world.
I love
when
that.
we prioritize this, then we start to quite quickly stabilize an experience of reality that is sovereign. It's independent of the outside world.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like I catch myself to like in the peaks and troughs rather than, in that middle ground.
Yeah, that's where most of us spend our life because it's been habituated. It's just part of, we brought up with that if you get more, if you experience more, then life will be better. And so we're led to believe that we're going to have some destination in the future, that if I acquire enough and make enough and get enough, then I will eventually find that elusive happiness. But unfortunately, it's just not attainable. It doesn't exist. It's not part of the characteristic of that world.
It's so funny. It's so funny as individuals how we think, how our mind constructs how huge our world is, and how, this is it, this is me, and this is everyone, and everything's such a big deal. And then when you realize that you're this teeny tiny insignificant. I remember once walking through this was, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I was walking through the CBD. I don't often go to the CBD in Melbourne, and I was walking through and I looked up at the buildings and I saw a funny little sign in a window of somebody's little gym, and I'm in the fitness industry and gyms and that, and kind of know, you get to know all the gyms and all the people, and this was a martial arts gym, so a lot of the boxing people and the boxing gyms, and I was like, what's that? I've never heard of that place. And my mind just started realizing how much of the world we just don't know when we think we know it all. And then it kind of spanned out. It was like I could change industries and move suburbs and literally know nobody and be nobody. Like, you think you're somebody in your world and everybody knows you because everybody in that teeny tiny little space is. And then there's like the whole freaking world, and we're nothing. Like, we're hardly a part of it.
Imagine when you expand that idea into a galaxy that has billions of suns in it. And when you take that world and expand it into multiples of galaxies, and when you expand that into the universe, which has trillions of galaxies, which have billions of suns. So this is the magnitude of the universe that we exist in. And when we expand our consciousness, we reduce the size of our problems.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. How'd you start in this? Where did this start for you? Were you always interested in this? Did you always did you walk straight out of school into this space, or did you do a bit of plumbing
You
or
know,
something along the way?
but it's been quite a journey. I remember as a kid, I'm actually in my parents' house now, and it's still got my childhood stuff in my bedroom. It's quite funny, and it's as a kid, I had a very strong sense of God, and I was brought up a Catholic. We went to mass all the time. We did rosary, before dinner. We did grace at dinner. We did penance in Lent and stuff, and had to give up things. And I had a very strong sort of religious upbringing in Catholicism, and I think that was the foundation for a connection to something bigger, something. I used to pray a lot. I had a very strong sense of God and God's presence, and some awareness of some intelligence of some sort. At that time, I thought it was something up in the sky that listened to my prayers, but I had a very strong response to my prayers as well, which was always interesting. Mum always said that, I'd pray for things and things kept happening all the time. This amazing manifestation capability, silly stuff. I won't go into it, like, winning raffles and things like that at school. But
I love that.
I had a very strong sense of that as a kid. And then in my 20s, I became a broker, and I just got so far distant from that connection where I completely dropped any sense of connection of higher self or purpose or God or spirituality or anything like that. And I just became a broker in finance. And interestingly, the darkest and most challenging times of my life, where I sought my identity, my experience, my fulfillment through the external world, through drugs and drinking and partying and going crazy and making lots of money. I was really Wolf of Wall Street broker on a massive trading room floor. And that was some of my darkest times, and eventually led to a nervous breakdown at the age of 29. So I went into a full collapse with severe anxiety, depression, addictions, insomnia, agoraphobia. I was seeing psychiatrists, put on suicide watch. I was on pharmaceutical drugs and really contemplating whether I wanted to go on with life.
Wow.
And that's when I discovered the universe sent me a very interesting signal at that point in time. And the universe never gives up on you. Whenever you feel hopeless, anyone listening, it doesn't give up on you. Sometimes we can turn our back on it. Sometimes we might be closed off to listening, but it's always there supporting. And it sent me this message. It was a documentary I was watching about a property developer. I was staying at home. I couldn't go to work, and I was watching this documentary about this guy doing property development. And they had this tiny section in the story how he used meditation. And he was in a suit, in a chair, meditating. And it was like this light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. And interesting, if I look at my life, the times of my greatest suffering was the times I was furthest away from spirit, soul, self, God, whatever you want to call it. And this is interestingly a macro perspective of what the Vedic worldview is of humanity. It's our darkest and our most turbulent time is because we're furthest and furthest away from that connection to our inner being. And we're looking outside of ourselves, constantly thinking that that's where this elusive pleasure and truth and fulfillment exists. And that's what's leading us to this turmoil and this chaos and this sickness that we're all suffering from, which is a sickness of discontent, of stress. And it's the same thing that happened in my life. And my life became more orderly, more cohesive, more coherent, and more full of joy and lovingness. It's not perfect by any means, but certainly it became better, and I became better the more I started to connect inwards and connect that part of me that I was ignoring.
Why do you think that as humans, and it's often subconscious to a degree at first until we kind of dig and realize it or bring it out, but why do you think that we never put ourselves first, and we are often so mean to ourselves? Why do we bully ourselves?
I think it's just a deep code in us. It's a great question, I must admit.
I just feel like when you speak to people and when when you're coaching someone or you're sharing something and you're digging deep and when you can really get under the surface to things and people open up, they often find, or they'll often share thoughts about themselves that aren't great. And it intrigues me that our minds and our consciousness has evolved that way. I often look at how we've evolved and process human behavior, and I've always found that you know, what's the purpose of that? Why is that so? It's heartbreaking, and there's often a purpose for other things. And what is the purpose for that?
I don't think it's a purpose. I think it's a fault. It's a glitch in the code, right? It's a code that's been passed down. We operate from a code. We have a hardware and a software like your computer and your phone. And your hardware is your physical body. And that's a code that's been built in from genetics, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your eyes, the shape of your eyebrows, your lips, your nose. You don't get to choose that. It's like, here's your makeup of your hardware, and that's your cellular structure that's compiled in a particular shape and form. But you also got an operating system, and that operating system firstly was coded before you even came out of the womb with your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and genetic code that's been put into the software, which drives the hardware. But not only is that software pre-coded when you came out of the womb, but then it gets even further coded through your daily experiences in life. So all it takes is a few times where someone says, you're no good, you're hopeless, you're not worthy, for you to buy into that operating system. And so this has been passed down for generations. And I think the work that we have to do is to realize that there's a code, to work on upgrading the code to a new operating system. And that's the beauty of the software, is that it can be reprogrammed, it can be adapted, it can be improved upon. And we have to continually look at making sure that our hardware is in optimal well-being, and that's what you focus on predominantly, and focus on our software and make sure that that's operating well. There's one more component that really needs to be taken into consideration here. And I like to use the phone as an analogy here. So the phone has a hardware and a software. The hardware is obviously continually updating. We're continually getting new hardware, which is new operating, a new device, right? Every 2 to 5 years, Apple puts out a new phone. Now, we can get a new phone, but if we don't update the software in the phone, then there's going to be incompatibility, right? So you update the iOS, right? So if you've got an iPhone. So the iOS in the phone is pretty good. It's got certain functionality. There's camera, there's calendars, there's, all sorts of things that I can use in the phone. And so it has, with it, when I pick up the phone, it has an existing operating system in the phone. It's got a software and a hardware. There's one other thing that's really fascinating about this phone. Now, it's not the quality of this thing that I'm going to talk about now. The third component's not in the phone. The phone's in it. The phone's in it. And the phone is an incredible device that can tap into that field. So the phone's in the net, which is an infinite supply of information. All wisdom, all knowledge, all truth. I'm using that for the analogy of us, but all the internet information, whether I'm in Bali, whether I'm in Antarctica, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm in Sydney, this phone taps into that entire field. So wherever this phone moves, it's in the information. And it just has the capacity to tune into that information. So we have a software in our mind, we have a hardware in our body, but we have the capacity, like a phone, to tune into the field of infinite creative intelligence. All wisdom isn't in our software. Wisdom is in the field. We're in the field of wisdom. We just have to learn how to open our mind. They talk about opening your mind or expanding your mind, expanding it out of the cranial sacrum container into that field, so that all of that intelligence, all that wisdom comes in to the software.
How turbulent was your journey from the place you were in when you started playing with meditation? What was that like? Where did you start? How many times did you hit the wall? Was it frustrating? Were you like me?
It wasn't actually. It wasn't that at all. I heard this guy talk about meditation in the interview on TV. He used the word transcendental meditation, and at that point, I'd been using a lot of drugs. I enjoyed the rave culture and nightclubs and all the things that went with it, and I love this idea of transcending, getting out of control a bit and getting out of into that world. And when that obviously came with huge karmic consequences, I went into a really dark place because of those addictions, and it wasn't very sustainable. But when I heard that word, this idea of transcending, to go beyond, and it really triggered something in me. And so I remember pulling up the yellow pages and ringing up Transcendental Meditation, and I went to some intro talks, and the guy was saying things like I'm saying today, and it was just like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been waiting for all my life. Everything he said landed so poignantly for me that it was exactly what I needed to hear. And so I signed up for the course. It was no turning back. The beauty of that particular meditation technique, which is the one I've been practicing and teaching for many years, was its ability to provide A, bliss, and B, tangible results quickly. It was easy, it was blissful, and it was effective. And those three boxes need to be ticked for it to be worthwhile pursuing, I think, personally. Otherwise, we live in a society where we want to do things that are enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable, we back out of it pretty quickly. And so that's why I teach, is why I practice it. I found it really enjoyable. I didn't struggle with it at all. I really enjoyed the practice because I was getting quite phenomenal results very quickly within the first week. Very, very tangible results. Like I was sleeping better, I was being less reactive, less stressed, I was feeling calmer, I was feeling happier. All of those anomalies melted away very, very quickly. And I went back to work in the same job for 16 more years. So yeah, it was not that the job was the problem, it was my relationship, my reactivity to it. And that's why this technique for me, it was the basis of the technique is you do it twice a day for 20 minutes. And the teacher just said, take it or leave it, it's up to you. And I was like all in because I could see the benefit. So every day I meditated twice a day. I was, partly that's my nature, but partly because I just got a lot of benefits out of it.
Amazing. Do you feel like people who have experienced, I guess, like you mentioned, taking drugs and having those, I guess, experiences where you're going wherever your mind's taking you, depending on what you're doing, do you think that opens your mind up to relate to some of this easier? If you've experienced taking yourself to places mentally with substances, is it easier for your mind to be open to that than someone who hasn't?
I do like working with people with addictions. The reason being is that they're so adamant that there's a higher experience to be had, whether it's gambling or sex or drugs or drinking, that they're craving this experience, although they just might not be using a sustainable tool for it. Yeah. But there's a deep knowingness about, even it could be exercise, it's just like this yearning to have. And so it's just like, that's fine. I never tell any of my clients who are coming to me with addictions to drop the thing that they're addicted to. All I like to do is substitute it with something more sustainable. So when they'd find meditation, that like it was for me, it's like, oh, wow, this is even better. Like I don't have those negative karmic effects, like a come down or a hangover, and that it's actually making my life get better, even though it makes me feel better. Wow, that's crazy. Like normally things that make me feel better make my life worse. Whereas this makes my life, this is like exercise, it makes my life better and it makes me feel better. So you just keep doing it, right?
Yeah. Do you find people then leave behind their addictions without any need for...
Yeah, it just doesn't, yeah, because the thing that they were using the addiction for has been replaced by something that elevates their life anyway.
Yeah.
Because they're really not looking for the drug or the alcohol or the gambling. What they're looking for is the byproduct of that, which is the biochemical response that happens in their body, oxytocin, serotonin, whatever that action is triggering. So gambling doesn't trigger that for me. I just don't like gambling. Whereas other things did. And so that's why I was addicted to those other things. But they were just trigger mechanisms for something that I had the capacity to generate in myself anyway, which is serotonin and oxytocin. And it's been proven that meditation will increase your serotonin, oxytocin, melatonin levels without those negative side effects. So yeah, it just becomes a no-brainer for people when they start it.
Tell us about the, what's the documentary?
The Portal.
The Portal. Tell us about that.
So I really wanted to get the message of the power of meditation out to the world, because it really was a game changer for me. And I thought I could see how it was affecting in a positive way a lot of other people as well. So I wanted to make a documentary that really got out to the world in a big way, something along the lines of what The Secret did, which managed to penetrate the households of the world. So we set out with this idea to make a documentary about the power of meditation through personal story and showcase 6 powerful stories that all went through a crisis and came out the other side of that crisis using meditation, and how meditation helped them see something else, to find a way forward, to break the shackles of the code and conditioning that had put them into the crisis in the first place, and to free them. And so that was the starting point of that project, was to get the film out. So we raised some capital from some wonderful investors, and we've got the film out now.
How long was that process? How long did that take to make?
Way too long. Way too long. Never again. It should have been 3 years, but it's been 9 years now.
Whoa! I did not expect that. That's a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
Like you're proficient at meditating and having the patience of a saint then, I guess.
Totally. The patience or stupidity.
I love it. What made it take so long? What did you come up against that you didn't expect?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. I mean, we met many hurdles and many obstacles. Firstly, we did a first version of the film with another director, which didn't land. It really was not the original intention, and it was a big detour that we ended up having to spend a good 2-3 years down that path, and ended up having to realize that we had to pivot back into alignment, and we had to drop the project and start realigning it and starting again, which was very, very difficult. And then things like COVID came along and shut down our cinema release, rolling it out last year, and just making a film is just a long process. Yeah, surprised how long it took.
Positives?
You need a lot of patience.
Was there positives that come out of it you didn't expect? What did you learn, or what did you experience?
It taught me a lot. It taught me so much. It's been so humbling. It taught me so much, but I think the main thing was to, like any challenge, to be less egoically engaged in it, and be more in flow. And there was a lot of control, and I think I learned to be a lot humbler in the process.
How interesting. For people that are listening,
I learned as well that it's not where I want to be spending my time making film.
Sometimes that's an important lesson too, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a big lesson.
It's really interesting. When I started this podcast, I look at now I do it, as a pretty full-time gig, really. But I've always said the reason I think it was successful is because that wasn't the plan. The plan was the couple of things I wanted to get out of it for me personally. The plan was I wanted the experience, and I wanted to better myself as a communicator, and I wanted to network at a high level. I realized I had the capacity to leverage the situation I was in, and I thought that'd be beneficial. So I just focused on that, and then next minute I was like, oh, look where we've landed. And I'll always look back and I think, if I had have sat at the start, and this is what I was saying to you before about that kind of having an awareness on things, and always doing that check-in and looking at, how do you feel about this, and how are you operating within this now? Because remember what made it work, and it sounds a bit woo-woo, but what made it work was not the outer things. It wasn't that, it was the passion and the intention behind it, and it was the belief behind it, and it was my personal energy behind it, without laying my attention on the nuts and bolts of it. But then when something becomes a thing, you've got the nuts and bolts as well, and obviously you have to have an awareness on those. So I'm always pulling myself back and forth to those types of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, got it. 100%.
Yeah. What do you think for people listening that are like, so there's a lot of us sitting at home right now that could do with a bit of meditation, let's be honest. For people who are listening, what things can people expect to overcome or improve, and what is a reasonable start? Because for a lot of people to go, I know we're all sitting at home right now doing nothing, a lot of us, or with a lot of extra time on our hands, but doing twice a day, 20-minute meditation, sitting still, doing something we've never done before that can be quite challenging, something that most people would just go, no way. So what's an entry-level expectation, and what are a couple of things that that people might be experiencing right now that you can say, hey, you'll definitely feel a change in this ailment, whether it's an illness, whether it's a mental illness, whether it's an experience, whether it's an attitude, whether it's whatever it is. Throw some things out there that might catch people's attention.
Yeah, one of the big issues in our world at the moment is insomnia. So that's just being able to turn our minds off. We've really become a very cerebral society where we're feeding our minds with so much information and data. So when it gets to sleep time, the mind's like, what, over already? No, I enjoy this. And the mind doesn't want to turn off, right? So
Yeah.
one of the big things that was a big shift for me and my students is that being able to switch the mind off, where you have sovereignty over the mind. So that's the main shift that happens, is that you realize that you're not the mind, your consciousness, which then influences the mind, as opposed to most people just are the mind because they haven't connected to the consciousness, which is beyond the mind. So that's one of the big shifts, is people being able to sleep better. We find that people start to get more energy. They get a lot more aliveness. And this is the prana in the body. This is the life force. That's, it's interesting. So it's only just got it here, so I may as well use it. We'll see a number of these organizations, the American Cancer Society, the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, they all have this symbol, right? And that symbol is actually life force. It's vitality. It's your kundalini, right? And kundalini is an ancient symbol. I'll hold it up here. This is the kundalini symbol. So they've all borrowed an ancient symbol of vitality and health. But when we meditate, that kundalini awakens, and this prana, this life force, this vitality and zest and vigor becomes just a natural part of who we are. We start to become a lot more energized and healthy. Other practices call it prana or chi, but there's a recognition that there's a vitality and a life force that is really the key to your existence. And for most of us, really flat and dormant and dead, particularly the diets we have, the sitting around, our remote control on our phones, and not hydrating and not exercising. So the chi gets very blocked and clogged up, and it doesn't really flow through us. And it should be moving and flowing through us as we're sort of feeling beautiful, luscious and sensual and sexy and alive and joyful all the time. And so that then flows over into you feeling more energized. So you feel like exercising more, which means that still activates even more prana and chi. So it all works together. And so meditation really is one of the key things to bring that about in our lives, is bringing that life force to the fore. Another big thing is our levels of happiness. And this is another little chart, just by chance, I didn't think I'd use these, but I like to use these for my students, is this is a stressed person's body. And we'll see that in a stressed person's body, we have a decrease in oxytocin, serotonin, and melatonin. And there's a very good reason for that, because the body's trying to protect you when it's a marauding tribe or a saber-toothed tiger. It doesn't want you falling asleep. It doesn't want you feeling compassion and love when you're about to go into battle. We want cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine in a stressed person's body that's in fight, flight, or sympathetic nervous system. That's your biochemistry. But when we meditate, we suddenly see this complete opposite happen. We shut down cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and we start increasing melatonin, serotonin, and oxytocin. So as a result of that, you start feeling happier. You start feeling like sleeping better. You start having more feelings of love in your heart. And these all start to just spontaneously unravel in the body as a result of you closing your eyes and meditating. So when it comes back to where should people go, what should people do, should they start? I can say, just do 5 minutes a day just to start small. It's not going to make any difference. It really isn't going to make much difference. If you're stressed for 24 hours and you take out 5 minutes to close your eyes and take a calming breath, you're really not going to notice much difference. You're probably going to stay stressed for the most of the day. We need to get serious about this. We need to get serious about the health of our society. We need to get serious about the happiness of our society. We seem to be really okay with accepting this rapid increase in ADHD, anxiety, insomnia, depression, bipolarism, suicide, poor health, obesity, MS, cancer. We seem to think that that's all okay, and if we just pop some pills or get an injection, everything's going to be fine. We need to really start thinking about our health and happiness and get a lot more sovereign with the state that we're in. And so I could say, just do what you're doing, but put 5 minutes aside. It's not going to work. What I always say is just to do what's going to make an impact. Get yourself back on track. Get sovereign in your own happiness and health, and make meditation a commitment in your day, and make it a part of your day, not because it's copping out, not because you're checking out, not because you're not being productive, because it's essential. It's essential if we want to continue on as a species, I think.
It's the hardest thing to take people out of the doing and bring an awareness to less is more. Bring an awareness to perform. I often talk about, I can't remember what podcast or conversation it was, but in the last few days I was talking to someone and I was saying, when there's, like, imagine the performance of a sprinter who sprinted the amount of consistent time that we do and overthink. Like, think about our minds as humans right now and how much we produce targeted thought and do things, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. Our mind is always processing more than what we're doing. And if you took that into the world of a sprinter and said, instead of just doing your sprint training and recovering, you're going to sprint 12 hours a day. Now, no one to be surprised that the sprinter's performance will be terrible and they wouldn't win a race. But yet, as workers, we take our 8-hour day, we throw in overtime, we do work from home, then we go home and we do a side hustle, and then we do more and we do more and we do more, and we're like, well, more must be, but I don't have time to meditate or to look after my body because I've got to get this work done because I've got to be better at my job. So guess how you'll be better at your job?
We do have to reassess our values.
Yeah.
We do have to reassess our values, and this is going to take a while, but it usually gets to a point like it did for me. I had to reassess my values because I needed to. And we're getting to that point as a species collectively. If we don't reassess our values soon, we won't have the opportunity to reassess our values because we won't be here. We would have either burned ourselves out physically or we would have burned ourselves out of the planet.
Whereabouts can my listeners find you online? Have you got things that we can get involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, where I'm probably most active is Instagram. So I'm quite engaged on Instagram and responsive there. But my website, tomcronin.com, both Instagram is Tom Cronin and then my website's Tom Cronin. And they can find my online programs, meditation courses, weekend workshops, retreats, coaching programs, the film, everything and anything that I'm involved in is all there.
Amazing. We'll have links in the show notes. Check it out, guys. I mean, I'd love to hang around and chat, Tom, but I've got some meditation to squeeze in,
Yeah, totally.
I've got 20 minutes of meditation to bang out today. So my planned 10 minutes to get into the routine of it's just going to have to be quickly stepped up now. I realise that I'm just dropping the ball. I'm dropping the ball.
Your life will be much better and more productive anyway.
Do you know what's interesting, though? I've been doing it for a few days now, and in the beginning, so I like to have something. So I put on this clip with some music, and I was putting on a 6.5 minute clip or something at the start, and then just going for a little bit longer. And it's surprising when you actually get into something how quickly that time will pass. Like at first, 6 minutes was like, is this ever going to end? Sure, that's enough. Like a part of my mind's like, that's all right. Look, you've done a bit today. Just do a bit more tomorrow, and you'll be like, you've still done it. You've ticked the box. And then, yesterday when I did it, I was like, oh, that clip's over already. I feel like it only just started. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Time can be slow when we're looking for something else to happen, or it can be really quick when we're just experiencing bliss. And so the thing with meditation is if we can access bliss, then you can sit for a long time in it and be fully in a state of, I'm okay with this, this is fine.
I did a 3-day Reddit silent retreat once, and I wasn't a meditator, especially back then.
No, that would be hard then.
Well, funnily, we arrived, and when I signed up for it, I mean, I knew the idea of the whole thing, but I hadn't really brought it to my awareness that would be a good 6 to 7 hours worth of meditations. So there were 3 or 4, hour and a half-ish blocks of meditation every single day, sitting still in silence, and kind of got there and heard that and went, oh, well, of course, what else are we going to do? But I was like, oh, this is, because I'm really going to struggle with this. And Tom, it was really easy. Every single
Beautiful.
session, it went far quicker than I thought, and it was only and I think it was the very last day, the very last session. I remember getting like all antsy, and I think that's because I had this mental checkout. It was like, oh, this is the last session, and then we're going to have our end, a little ceremony where we get to talk to people. And I guess it was like, when you need to go to the bathroom and you've been a long drive home, and then when you get to the front door and you put your key in, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I really can't hold on. It was like that feeling. It was like, we're so close to the end. My mind was like, nah, we're out. But yeah, the 3 days were quite amazing. So definitely worth doing. Thank you so much. It's been amazing to talk to you, and
great to be here.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted on my progress.
Oh, good. I look forward to following and hearing more about your happy meditations.